You had a plan, not a daydream, an actual plan. You wrote it down, you told someone about it, and you may have even started on the first step. And for a little while, it felt like this time was actually different. Then one morning, you woke up and it was gone. Not the goal, but the feeling. The thing that made it feel possible. And without that feeling, the whole thing felt like it never really mattered in the first place. And so you stopped. And now you're sitting with that same familiar thought. Why do I always want to quit? It's not proof you picked the wrong thing. It's not a sign you don't want it bad enough. Something specific is happening to you. And once you see what it is, you can stop letting it make the decisions for you. There's a version of this question most people never actually ask themselves. If I wanted this before and it was real, not fake, I felt it, why do I feel absolutely nothing now? And they answer it before the question ever finishes forming by saying, I'm lazy. I don't have what it takes. Other people can do this. I can't. They take that feeling and turn it into who they are. And it's wrong. And this is the worst part. It doesn't feel wrong. It feels like honesty. Like you're finally being real with yourself after a long time of playing pretend. The thing is, you're not being honest. You're being tricked. And the thing doing the tricking is something that happens to every single person who's ever tried to build anything. Think about the last time you started something you actually cared about. There was a moment, maybe when the idea first clicked, maybe the first day you showed up, where everything felt alive, not just excitement, something that felt like purpose. And you weren't wrong to feel it. Everything feels achievable in those early days because nothing has tested it yet. The gap between where you are and where you're going hasn't fully come into focus. That's why the first week feels like it could change everything. And then the reality shows up. When that gap eventually does come into focus, the progress you're making stops feeling like progress at all because it's slow. And slow doesn't feel like moving forward. It feels like standing still while the goal gets further and further out of reach. And then something shifts inside of you. Not gradually. For most people, it's shockingly fast. One week, you're locked in. The next, you're staring at the thing you're supposed to be doing and feeling nothing. Worse than nothing. You feel like you never even cared in the first place. Like the version of you that started this was someone you don't even recognize. What most people don't know, that feeling doesn't just return to normal. It overshoots. The anticipation that was carrying you, it doesn't fade. It bottoms out below where you started. You're not back at zero, you're in a deficit, in a hole, and you're being asked to keep building from inside that hole. Most people look at this, that feeling that they have, as a sign. And it is, just not the one that you think. When that feeling disappears, it doesn't just feel like a mindset problem, because it feels real. The desk you're working at feels further away than it did last week. Getting started takes way more energy than it ever should. And there's a weight that sits in your chest before you've even opened your laptop. A low hum of dread that wasn't there when you started. And then you stop, and the weight is lifted. And not in a triumphant way, like you've been holding your breath and you didn't know kind of way. Someone finally told you it was okay to let it go, and the dread disappears. You finally feel like yourself again. That relief is real. Your brain manufactured it specifically to make you stop. And it worked. What your brain didn't tell you is what it traded to make that feeling happen. Every result that was 8 weeks away, every version of yourself waiting on the other side, every quiet moment 6 months from now where you could have looked back and thought, wow, I did the thing. Quitting bought you relief today and charged everything else to a card you won't see the bill for until later. Here lately, I keep reminding myself that I have 2 choices to make. One that will give me relief now, and the other that says, you're gonna regret this in a year from now. And it's that second feeling that's what keeps me going day in and day out. If that feeling sounds familiar, it's because you've been here before, and you'll keep coming back here until something changes. Because it isn't quitting that does the real damage, it's what comes after. Your brain is always learning. Every time you stop when it gets hard, you're teaching it something. When this feeling shows up, we leave. You don't say it out loud, you don't decide it consciously, you just do it. And then you do it again and again. At some point, quitting stops being something you do and becomes something you are. Not because you're weak, because you've repeated a pattern long enough that your brain stopped questioning it. It becomes an automatic response to the same question. What do we do when things get hard? And patterns aren't permanent. They're only repeated decisions, which means they can be interrupted. The version of you that always quits is not the final version, and it can be interrupted. And on top of all that, you're trying to build something real in an environment built to make sure you don't. You know the voice. If only I had more time. If only I started sooner. If only I didn't have this holding me back. That voice sounds true, but it isn't. It's your brain looking for an exit that doesn't feel like quitting. And every time you reach for your phone instead of doing the work, your brain gets a hit of that same feeling. That's free, fast, 0 effort required. Every scroll, every video, every notification. Do that enough and your baseline shifts. A page written, a video recorded, a small win that used to feel like something stops registering. Not because you've changed as a person, because you've been training your brain to expect more, faster, for less. Discipline and consistency can still get you everything you're after, but you have to know what you're up against and choose every day which system you're going to feed. So stop asking yourself, why do I keep quitting? That question assumes the problem is you, and that's not always the case. Instead, ask yourself, what does this need to feel worth continuing? Because motivation is not a starting condition, it's a result. It follows action. It doesn't unlock it. In 2011, researchers at the University of Toronto studied people who struggled to maintain long-term goals. What separated the ones who followed through wasn't drive or talent, it was one thing, that they acted before they felt ready. They didn't wait for the motivation to show up. They moved, and the motivation followed. So make the next step small enough that your brain can't negotiate. Make the win visible enough that your brain can see it. You're not trying to feel motivated. You're trying to create the conditions where motivated behavior can happen. You didn't lose the desire. You hit the part where it gets real, where the gap is visible, the reward is far away. And nothing is confirming you're even on the right track. You hit the part that was always going to come. The part that separates the version of who started from the version of you who finishes. Every person who ever built something you looked at and thought, man, I wish I could do that. They sat exactly where you're sitting. They felt exactly what you're feeling. The difference is they didn't let the feeling have the last word. And now it's your turn. Are you going to keep quitting or maintain the discipline to always, always do the thing?